The stress level in the National Football League is incredibly high, especially when you're a young player, and that's what the Broncos have a lot of. We're here to talk about it on OBT2. We told you about it. We're here, Mace, and Sean Payton talked a little bit about these young players on the roster today.
Yeah, he's got a younger roster than he's had in most of his years in the league, and specifically, it's a roster that's going to have to rely on a lot of these younger players. And especially for the ones that are coming in for the first time, it can be kind of daunting. But as you and I saw today, there were guys out there who are young but are settling in. And we even saw this in OTAs and minicamp as well, that their second time around, they're still young, but they've gotten over some hurdles.
Yes, and if we talk about like out of nowhere players, there are players that are young on the come up that aren't just the rookie class. And you and I have to talk about JL Skinner. So I saw plays from Elijah Garcia, from Thomas and Coombe, and JL Skinner. So excited to get out there, Mace.
Yeah.
And you and I spent a lot of time talking to him last year.
Yeah, and the thing with Skinner is that he's got a huge opportunity in front of him. Caden Stearns on the pup list, Delarian Turner-Yell on the pup list. They're both coming back from knee injuries last year. So this is his moment right now, because when Stearns gets back, and it looks like Stearns' return will come sooner rather than later. I think Turner-Yell, because he had that injury in week 17 last year on New Year's Eve, probably looking at a ramp up time that goes into the regular season potentially. Caden Stearns could be back in camp, and so that's going to squeeze everyone, push everyone down when he gets out there. So we saw Skinner get some first team reps during OTAs and minicamp. Now we're seeing him. It's behind Brandon Jones and PJ Locke with the second team, and I thought he looked pretty good. Showed a lot of range, and maybe is a pretty good fit safety-wise for what the Broncos are looking for from that position going forward in the post-Simmons era.
Right. And it's one of those things that grinds my gears, Mace, is when we hear about rankings of their roster and their 30th or 32nd or whatever. It's like they have talent. It's young talent. It's unproven talent. But, you know, we have opined on this show or asked the question like, when can we see more Elijah Garcia? When can we see more Thomas and Coombe? When can we see more JL Skinner? And there are others, too, on this team.
Yes. You look back at the Rams last year. Now, obviously, they had a quarterback in Matthew Stafford who could elevate everybody and could kind of bear the weight. But that Rams team that came in last year, when the Broncos had joint practices with them toward the end of training camp, it was a team that you looked down and you saw over 2/3 of the roster was either rookies or first-year players. In other words, players that were in a camp the last year and maybe played in the preseason, maybe were in the practice squad, but didn't get a year of service time. So by necessity, because of their salary cap issues, they had to rely on them. And what you saw over the course of the seasons, when you put them out there, they got better to, use something that Quinn Miners said earlier this week. Pressure made some diamonds for the Rams. You just have to accept there are going to be mistakes along the way. Can you accept those? This is the real question. And it's really a question for Sean Payton. I don't know if it's one that he can answer right now, because you can sit here in a vacuum and say you're willing to live with the mistakes, but what happens when those mistakes happen when it counts? Are you going to put them back out there, keep sending them up, or are you going to get the itchy trigger finger and overreact? This is going to take patience on the part of Sean Payton and the coaching staff, because it's one thing to talk about it now, but when you're down in Tampa on a sultry, steamy afternoon in week 3, and you've got some young players making some mistakes on the road in a rough environment, you can't sit there and have your finger on the eject button, right? You've got to be willing to live with that and think bigger picture than just the urgency of the game.
Right. We'll see if that patience can be had, but we know there's a lot of teachable moments. Before we get into the Sean Payton clip, And why am I forgetting the wide receiver coach's name? But he talked about him teaching and yelling at Troy Franklin, like Sean Payton. I think it was our buddy Parker Gabriel, number one in our hearts. That asked about, hey, like Troy Franklin, like, hey, and you definitely, there was some vociferous, we can't say what was said, but like certainly some attention was paid to all those wide receivers, but Franklin, I heard, Jalen get a call out, a good one, by the way, but like, yes, the wide receiver coach, which unfortunately I'm forgetting his name. Kerry Colbert. There you go. Kerry Colbert. Yeah. I was like, the
wasn't
USC
playing
kid.
that long ago. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
Mid 2000s for a couple old guys like us. It seems like yesterday.
Yeah, it definitely seems like yesterday. And I remember his playing days, but it's like, yes, and Coach Payton did say there's some yelling, but there's a lot of teaching in that, a lot of love too.
He wouldn't want wouldn't want the yelling without the teaching. That's the thing. Like you go back a couple of years ago, we talk about Butch Berry. I think he's a little bit of a pincushion on this show. Butch had a habit of yelling without teaching. There's got to be some instruction involved, and it can't be constant. I mean, I remember back in 2006, Tim Brewster on Tony Scheffler. That's where the yelling went too far. That really affected Scheffler's confidence. It was kind of remarkable that he ended up becoming a pretty good player in the league because, boy, that year, he was knocked down. I feel like it probably delayed his development as a player a little bit. That there was that summer just spent breaking him down to the point where you didn't think his name was Tony Scheffler. You thought his name was GD at Tony, right? I mean, because you heard that so often on the practice field. I mean, so there's a line you have to walk here. Today it was Troy Franklin who was on the receiving end of that invective. If it's Troy Franklin every day, you start worrying about that.
Sure.
But hopefully it won't be. And I thought it was interesting after practice because if you just went by what you saw today, you would have thought Troy Franklin, because the coaches are riding him, because Colbert's riding him, was just messing up left and right, and he's a mess up, and it may not happen for him. And then after practice, what does Sean Payton talk about with Troy Franklin? Says, yes, I have football IQ.
Mm-hmm.
And he's able to grasp things. So this is a case where the yelling is about the coach/coaches knowing that there's something there that they want to extract. Because the other thing also is if it doesn't work, and I think part of it is, he's got to, when they're running routes, you got to finish, as they say, right? You got to go all the way. You got to finish your route.
Yep.
If he doesn't do that and they have to keep prodding him, what's going to happen is Devon Bailey is going to take his reps. So,
Yep. Because that guy is going to do it. You got to take a chewing in the NFL, not promoting verbal abuse, but there's not that. There's teaching. And in that teaching, you're going to get some, advanced voices, some higher volume there. So let's go ahead and play Sean Payton. You want to do that now, Mace? Play the Sean Payton
because this sort of invective and dealing with it is part of the stress that young players have to deal with. It's not just about learning a voluminous playbook and having to try to figure things out at a higher level. It's also the pressure that you're dealing with. And here's what Sean had to say about the stress that young players deal with.
I think younger players in general stress, right? I mean, I think it's new. And I can remember being new and just, I think that, I think it's good to get that first spring under their belts where they kind of, they know the ropes a little bit. And, but I think that the best way I know to reduce that is to know what to do. Then, there's nothing worse than, walking in a classroom for a Friday test and you're not ready. Like, that's how I think, that's my recall of stress, right? But if you are ready, I think you can reduce that. And then we try to talk to them about paying attention to yourself. You're not just competing with the depth chart here. You're competing with the 31 other tight ends or right guards or defensive ends around the league. We had a kicking competition one of my latter years in New Orleans. All preseason, the discussion was A or B, A or B, A or B, and at the end of the season, We brought in Will Lutz for a workout, and it was neither A or B. It ended up being C. And so I think you're competing here initially, internally, to be your best.
Stress is coming from within as well, because there's a lot being thrown at you, right? And so you stress out about it. And over time, you've got to learn to tune out the noise. And that's the other thing.
Right.
There's always going to be noise, but you've got to put on the noise canceling headphones, as it were, so you only hear what's really important. And when you do that, then you're able to better focus. I mean, it's, John Elway used to say it was like drinking from the fire hose when he talked about young quarterbacks. But you could say that for almost any young player coming into the NFL in terms of what you're having to consume and what's being lobbed your way in a short amount of time. And this is part of the winnowing process. This is part of how you wean out players, is finding out who can handle this and who can't.
All right. I think the word that I'd like to focus on and what Coach said, Mace, is ready. Because, Big Al always used to say, when you already know. And it's like, yeah, when you are already, you are comfortable. There's a confidence.
Yeah.
You haven't done it, but you've studied the playbook. You know your assignment. You know what other guys are going to do, maybe. And that gives you a confidence. And I think in this game, it's so odd because these are the ultimate alpha males. But if you're not confident, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. That's it, because there are plenty of other guys out there who are confident. If you're not, then toodaloo, right? Really.
Okay.
I mean, that's basically it. If you don't have that confidence, unless you've got a massive level of talent, you're not going to stick. And the key is maintaining that confidence when you get your butt kicked. Look, the thing that happens a lot, and this is something that I don't really think we figured out in terms of draft prep and evaluation. The thing that we have not figured out is how to really get a read on which players are going to handle failure and not let it break them.
Mm-hmm.
Because these guys, you look around, you see 90 players on the field at training camp. And almost all of those 90 have been the best player or one of the very elite players on the field every time they've stepped onto it, going all the way up to the college level. You don't have many players who were just a guys in college that end up out there even being a part of training camp. So for some of them, when they get knocked on their butt, it's the first time they've experienced failure as a football player. Frankly, I think this was part of what sunk Jerry Jeudy here and led to things not working out, is because he had been a massive success, probably the best, most talented player on every football field onto which he stepped, even those at Alabama, which says a lot, right? And then you get to the NFL and the speed is higher, that the quality of opponent is higher,
Discipline,
and things start going wrong. Like, he had that drop the first game he played for the Broncos against the Titans, dropped that pass on Monday Night Football, right? And it's almost like that play lingered, and it was, he didn't, and he struggled to bounce back. That's why you look at that Chargers game later that year, and one drop became 2, 3, 4. It just mushroomed. He did get better in terms of his drop rate as his career went on, but I think you didn't see a guy who had the same level of confidence as he did when he came to the Broncos. I would argue that probably another thing that hurt him was, going through that rookie season when things are going wrong and it doesn't have the same level of bonding because of COVID, right? You're socially distanced in meetings and all that. It was an isolated environment in which to have your rookie season. And I think it was, these things add up. And then when there was a moment where it looked like he was getting the confidence back, what happens? He suffers a high ankle sprain in the first game of 2021, a moment where it looks like he's got perfect timing with Teddy Bridgewater. That's one of those moments I look back on and say, wow, that things could have turned out differently, because it looked like he was actually on the right track and able to kind of put the issues behind him. But then he took a detour, wasn't really healthy the rest of that year, even though he did come back in late October. And that, as they say, is that. And now Jerry Jeudy's a Cleveland Brown.
That's a wrap. And I will say this, there's bumps in your timeline that you must overcome. It's why I believe in Bo Nix. I was talking over the weekend with someone from Auburn and around that team. And I was like, what do you think of Nix at Auburn? And really the blame went on the coaching staff more so than on Nix. But Nix himself had to personally go through the adversity of, your father was a legend. Everyone expects everything out of you. You're not real good. And he had to leave and go away. So what are one of the reasons Bo Nix could work out, Mace? It's because he's faced that adversity.
See, that's one of the reasons why I like him and why I think it gives him a shot. Because you don't have, for so many players, you don't have that example of how do you respond to failure. We actually have seen it with Bo Nix. He had to transfer, put things back together. But I mean, basically, it's kind of a pun with the Auburn's nickname being Tigers, but he left as a tiger with his tail between his legs a little bit there when he parted ways from Auburn, ends up going to Oregon and puts it all back together. So that being said, you don't have the option of a transfer. I mean, we want it to work here. If you're the Broncos, right? This is, you're not going to, you don't want, if you have to send him packing in the transfer portal, as it were, then it's going to be the Broncos are probably in for a few more frustrating years. And I don't think anybody wants that. I was telling somebody working with the team today, just talking after practice, I'd really like to cover a winning season again.
It'd be nice. It'd be nice if Bo Nix works out and becomes that guy. I got plenty to talk about. That's why we do OBT1 and OBT2, sometimes OBT3. But we are here for you, Mace. But we need your help on YouTube. How can people help us out?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
and hit that notification bell
so that you never miss a vid. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. Follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's a BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.